Hi, welcome to Budget MTG Decks. All magic fun, all cards under $1. I'm David.
And I'm Jasper, and today we're going to talk about an effective and fun Pauper deck that you can build without breaking the bank.
Yeah, we only have one build rule, and that is all cards must be $1 in price. And Jasper, what is the deck that we're going to be playing today?
Well, today we're going to be playing red and green slivers, which is a bit of variation on the traditional white and green slivers that you'll often run into in Pauper. So hopefully we can show you why red and green is not only a great budget alternative, but also a very fun to play alternative.
Cool, so what is the win condition of this deck?
Well, it's red and green, it's slivers, so go wide, go big, and go home. It's basically what you're going to do.
With a victory, I suppose. Yeah. Go home with a victory. So to make this deck work, we're going to need certain types of cards. We're going to need 31 slivers, so the deck is heavy on slivers, 3 buffs, 2 removal spells, so we're low on removal, 4 draw cards, 20 lands, and a sideboard of 15 cards. So what is going to be the ideal turn progression?
Well, turn 1 we have 2 options for a 1-drop sliver. We have either the striking sliver or the virulent sliver. Then hopefully turn 2 we can follow it up with another big sliver, muscle sliver, predatory sliver, and so on until we have a very big army that hopefully kills our opponents.
Exactly. So not a very complicated strategy.
No, it's red and green, so you know what you're getting into.
All right, so let's get started with the slivers. We're going to start with our first sliver, and that is a virulent sliver. For a single green, it is a 1/1 sliver that states that all slivers have poisonous 1. Now, poisonous 1 states that if we're going to deal combat damage to our opponent is going to get 1 poison counter, and unlike Infect, it will not put -1 counters on creatures that it deals damage to.
Yeah, and of course the poisonous counters also don't scale with the amount of combat damage you deal to your opponent, but poisonous does stack, so if you have 2 virulent slivers and you attack with 3 slivers, they all deal combat damage, you get 3 times 2 is 6 poison counters, and of course as an additional bonus, they also deal the regular combat damage, so even if you don't win on the poison counters, you'll still end up bringing your opponent closer to 0.
Yeah, very versatile card. Yeah.
And then next up we have Striking Sliver. For a single red we have a 1/1 that gives all the slivers you control first strike. Now this, of course, is a very powerful ability in combat. It makes blocking much more complicated, and is especially nice with some of the buffing slivers we'll see later in the video.
Yeah. The next card, we've got 2 copies of Gemhide Sliver for 1 and a green. It is a 1/1 sliver, and it states that all slivers have a tap. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So this means that it helps us in mana fixing. I mean, we're not playing many colors, we're just playing 2 colors, but still quite nice to have that. And of course, mana ramping.
Yeah, and of course, it's also a very powerful option late in the game when you're sitting on a pretty wide board, but you need just a little more push to get through to your opponent. Then Gemhide Sliver can basically help you dump your hand onto the table and just straight into the red zone.
Yeah.
And next up we have Hard Sliver. For 1 colorless and a red, we have a 1/1 that gives all slivers haste, which of course pairs nicely with the Gemhide Sliver. You can play a sliver and immediately tap it for mana. And of course, especially late game, you can basically just dump everything and go straight for the throat.
Yeah, people are not expecting you to be able to put down all your creatures and then attack right away, especially if one of those creatures was the Heart Sliver.
Yeah.
Then we move on to the bread and butter of this deck, and the first one is Muscle Sliver for 1 and a green. So for 2 mana, it is a 1/1 sliver, and it states all slivers get +1/+1. So already it is going to be a 2/2 for 2, and additionally it's a lord for the rest of your slivers.
Yeah, and then we have Predatory Sliver, which basically does the same, except for your team, like all M14 slivers, is one of the design fixes that Wizards implemented at the time. M14 slivers only buff your own slivers, but in the end, it's pretty much the same, +1/+1 to all your slivers for a colorless and a green for a 1/1 creature.
Yeah, if you start putting these ones down, it gets out of control real fast.
Yeah.
Then we move on to Hunter Sliver for 1 and a red. It is a 1/1 sliver, and it states that all slivers have Provoke, which means that when this creature attacks, we're going to choose a creature our opponents control, and we're going to untap that, and that creature is going to be forced to block this creature. And that is going to be super handy, especially when our slivers get big or have first strike. It basically functions as removal.
Yeah, you can basically just swing into the red zone. Oh, you have a Llanowar Elves that you just tapped for mana, or maybe even if the Delver that you attacked with, well, that's nice, but we're still going to eat it, so untap it, block it, first strike damage, boom, done.
Super nice, yeah.
And then next up we have Two-Headed Sliver, which is another sliver for a colorless and a red 1/1, and it says that all slivers you control have menace. So if you block, you're going to have to do it with 2 creatures, which of course pairs very nice with the first strike and the provoke.
Yeah, it's going to make... I really love the menace mechanic because even if people have enough creatures to block with, usually one of those creatures that they're going to be blocking with is something they don't really want to lose. So you're always, as the attacker, we get to dictate where the damage goes and always make sure that we kill the creature that they really don't want to lose in that situation.
Yeah, and then finally we have 2 copies of Spinneret Sliver, which is a sliver for a colorless and a green, a 2/2, which basically says that all your slivers you control have reach. Most of the time it's going to be a 2/2 body that gets buffed further by your other slivers, but of course reach can be very relevant in Pauper because the flying creatures you're going to be seeing the most are Delver, Muldrifter, and they can't survive in the air against a Spinneret Sliver either way. And of course, if you're going to buff your Spinneret Sliver, then your Spinneret Sliver is usually going to come out of that combat alive.
Exactly, and the best part of it is that all our slivers have reach now, so it's not even that we just need that one. I mean, our entire team can block all the flyers, and that just is super, super sweet. That is it for the slivers. Let's have a look at the buffs.
Okay, so for the buffs we have 3 copies of Rancors, one of the most powerful 1-mana auras ever printed. For 1 green mana, you got an aura, enchant creature, and the creature gets +2/+0 and trample, which in itself is of course very nice. But when Rancor is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, it goes back to your hand. So you've got a Rancor on a sliver, you swing, the sliver dies, but you still have the Rancor, so you can swing it in again next turn with another Rancor sliver for extra combat damage.
Yeah, and we don't have any ways, other ways of giving our slivers trample in this deck, so this is a very nice way to be able to get through with a little bit of extra damage as well.
It's going to be basically the brute force of the deck.
Yeah, there's one way, of course, that this card can go into our graveyard, and that is, of course, if it gets countered, or if, when targeting with this spell, instant speed, somebody removes the creature you're targeting with, because then it does not resolve, and it also goes into the graveyard.
Yeah.
Well, that is it for the buffs. Let's move on to the removal. For our removal spells, we've got 2 copies of Flame Slash. For single red, it's a sorcery that deals 4 damage to target creature. Now, it is no lightning bolt, but still, for single mana, 4 damage is going to get rid of any creature on the battlefield pretty much. And that is going to be super useful. We don't need a lot of these because actually our deck is the deck that people are going to have to try and control because we're the ones going aggressive. So the removal there is in there just purely incidentally.
Yeah, of course, it doesn't go to the face or at instant speed like Lightning Bolt, but at 1 point of damage can be very relevant, especially in Pauper, where you're going to see a lot of Nivik Cyclops, a lot of affinity creatures with 4 toughness, Laguna Blend Trailblazer in Mono White Heroic. So it does have a lot of targets, and the 1 point of damage can make a bit of difference.
Yeah, exactly, and that for only a single red mana, so that's really great. Yeah. All right, let's move on to the draw spells.
So for our draw spells, we have a single playset of Lead the Stampede, which means for 2 colorless and a green, we have a sorcery, which says that you can look at the top 5 cards of your library, reveal any number of creatures among them, and put them into your hand. Now, this is not a traditional draw spell, it's a very green draw spell, creatures matter, and of course more than half of our deck's creatures, so we're usually going to use this to refill our hand and really close out the game in the later stages.
Yeah, this card together with the Gemhide Sliver, for example, really make sure that whatever you draw, you're going to be able to cast all of that right away.
And of course, with the 3 mana, usually means that it can come out around turn 4 or 5 when you've maybe missed a land drop or 2 and you've dropped your entire hand, you've got Lead the Stampede, and suddenly you have got a handful of gas again.
Super, super. That is it for the draw. Let's have a look at the lands. We divide the lands into 9 forests, 7 mountains, and 4 non-basics. Now, the 4 non-basics are Rugged Highlands. They come in tapped, gain us a life when they come in, and tap us for either a red or a green mana, which is exactly what we need because we're only playing 2 colors in this deck. That is it for the lands. Let's have a look at the sideboard.
So these are sideboard cards that can hopefully make sure that we have the advantage in game 2 and 3, hopefully to the point where game 3 isn't necessary. So we're going to start out with Ancient Grudge. For 1 and a red, we have an instant speed card that says destroy target artifact with a flashback for a green mana, which is of course really powerful against Affinity, Callblade, those kind of decks.
Yeah, I think also just the value they get for this for just for just 3 mana, being able to get rid of 2 artifacts, I think is a really great deal.
Yeah.
Then we move on to Electricity for a single red. It is an instant and it deals 1 damage to target creature you don't control, but if we pay 1 and a red, we're going to be dealing 1 damage to all creatures we don't control. And this is great against token strategies or even elves.
Yeah, and of course against elves it really can pay off to play it even more aggressive just for a single red. Your opponent starts forest, Llanowar Elves go, and you respond with Mountain Electricity, kill them Llanowar Elves, and suddenly they're already on the back foot.
Yeah, that might actually be a good strategy, absolutely.
And then next up, we have another 2 copies of Spinrad Sliver. We already played 2 in the main deck, so you know what it does and you know what it's good against. Mainly the Mold Drifters, the Delver of Secrets, the Spellstutter Sprites, those sort of things.
Yeah, so if you're playing against that, just sideboard these in for a full play set.
Yeah.
Then we move on to Life Goes On for single green. It's an instant. We're going to gain 4 life, but if a creature died this turn, we're going to gain 8 life instead. Now we're going to sideboard these in against very aggressive strategies or against burn, for example, to make sure that we've got that extra little bit of life when we're racing each other.
Yeah, and of course, especially the 8 life, it's instant speed, so you can get it anytime you need it. And 8 life is 3 lightning bolts, 3 lava spikes. It makes it very hard for a burn deck to burn you out before you beat them out.
Yeah.
And then next up we have 2 copies of Nihil Spellbomb. For 1 colorless mana, 1 generic mana, it's an artifact. Tap, sacrifice it, exile all cards in target player's graveyard. So you're going to be dealing with the Delve decks, the Reanimator decks, the decks that play a lot of flashback cards. It's a really valuable card.
Yeah, it also states that if this card would be put into the graveyard from the battlefield when you pay 1 black, and if we do, we draw a card. Now, we can't get that from our lands, but we can get that from our Gemhide Slivers.
Yeah.
Then we move on to the last card in the sideboard, and that is Tranquility for 2 any green. So for 3 mana, it's a sorcery. We're going to destroy all enchantments. So this is great against those Boggle decks, or basically enchantment-heavy decks, or decks that really care about pretty much auras. So that's going to neutralize them entirely.
Yeah, it's a really fun card to play against Boggles. Your opponent starts turn 1 Slippery Bogle. You think, oh, 1/1 hexproof, hard to deal with. You can't provoke it. And then they can't follow that with the Ethereal Armor, the Hyena Umbra, that sort of thing. Suddenly you have a 7/7 first strike Vigilance lifelink against you. Then you drop the Tranquility and it's just a humble 1/1 again.
And as it should be.
Yeah.
As it should be. All right, that is it for the sideboard. Let's have a look at the conclusion.
So in conclusion, this deck is a lot of fun. It's a bit of a variation on traditional Sliver deck you might see in Pauper. It doesn't buff up your creatures in terms of power and toughness as much as, for example, the white and green Sliver deck, but it does make combats a little more complicated, which is of course something that you might not expect from red and green Sliver deck.
Yeah, I really enjoyed playing this deck. It's extremely aggressive. I love how it, with the draw cards, we keep on refilling our hand, keep putting more Slivers on the battlefield. They all buff each other. It's like the quintessential tribe. And it's super aggressive, and I think that just makes it a lot of fun to be able to keep bringing in more of these guys that keep making your entire team stronger and just aggressive, attacking very aggressively with, for example, the first strike and the menace, and that makes combat really difficult for your opponents.
Yeah, and of course it also makes the deck much more unpredictable than a traditional Sliver deck, because if you're sitting against white and green Slivers, you think, oh, okay, they're going to have a muscle Sliver next, Sliver's going to get a little bigger, and then when you're playing against us, it's suddenly, oh, your Slivers might have menace, might have first strike, might have provoke, so you never know what the combat on your next turn is going to look like.
Yeah, especially with the haste.
Yeah.
They really don't know what's going to be coming the next turn. And it's also quite affordable. It comes into just below $23, which is, I think, pretty affordable for this this kind of power on the battlefield. And now we're going to have to ask you guys to head on over to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Join us on the socials. Let us know what you think of this deck. What cards do you really enjoy in here? What cards would you swap out? Let us know all about that. Also, subscribe to us here on YouTube for the most powerful decks and advice everyone can afford. And if you do, don't forget to hit the little bell button to be notified when a new video comes out. This was the first Pauper deck that we're doing on this channel. We hope to do many more. So if you like us making Pauper decks, please comment, please like this video, and let us know so we know that we have to make more of these in the future. Thanks for watching. I'm David.
I'm Jasper.
And this was Budget MTG Decks.